we got there. Okay, I think this has worked. Let's just see. Ah, there we are. And genius me hasn't sized the frame properly. Come on. What does that look like? You know, I think we're gonna have to do this without the frame because, God damn it, it's always when you add something in and think, oh, this will look cool, and then it just ends up messing everything up. Just difficult. Come on, we apologise to you guys watching afterwards. Just skip through until we start talking. Right, are we? Come on, please say this. All right, that's gonna have to do for this, because if I keep going on, I'm probably gonna get really mad. But hello, YouTubers and random Doctor Who fans. It is me, Ozzy, aka MonoSupreme, joined today with a very special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, I am the CyberPlanner, and I'm very grateful to Ozzy for inviting me onto his channel for a live chat this evening.
It's an honour to have you here. So we'll be talking about many things, from your YouTube journey to your preferences when it comes to Doctor Who, least favourite to collecting toys, and going through your guys' questions, which I asked you to submit in the last one. So I'll start off with our first point. So talk us through how you started on YouTube and your journey throughout the years.
I think I must have first become aware of YouTube around about late 2006, early 2007. And the very first search term I put in was Dalek. And almost immediately, I noticed that there were a number of animators who were making what at the time would have been fairly basic figure animations. Now, going back even further, in 1994, when I was only 14, I made my first Doctor Who animation with Dapol figures.
Oh, yeah.
And what I had left of, the original Kenner Star Wars range.
Yeah, yeah.
And one summer, I made what was essentially a completely improvised and absolutely terrible Doctor Who figure animation, which fortunately is missing in the archives. That died a death a long time ago, never ever to be resurrected. So I've been doing animation in a form for some time. It wasn't stop motion, by the way. It was all done live, moving the figures around and hands in frame and things like that. And when Character Options first started doing the 5-inch line, particularly when they released the Cybermen in 2006, although I can't stand the new series designs of the Cybermen at all, I thought these are quite good figures. and it might be worth doing some sort of animation with them. And then, although I'd been aware of them, I'd never collected them. Do you remember the Product Enterprise Rollermatics, which
Oh
were
yeah.
about Daleks? They were about 2.5 inches high.
Is that the ones in the three
And
packs? Isn't it?
that's right, they came in the 3 packs.
Yeah, yeah.
I never bought them.
No.
They were sort of, they sort of came out round about the time Dapol was finishing as a toy firm with the license for Doctor Who. And the Product Enterprise stuff was infinitely better. But at the time, I was only a student, and I'd been collecting Dapol since 1988, so that got my loyalty.
Right, okay.
But then, towards the end of 2006, they started to release. Do you remember they were the same molds, but they were micro-action talking Daleks. And I thought, right, I really like these. I'm going to do an animation. I'd become aware of YouTube.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, I'll have a go at stop motion. I knew the theory of stop motion, although I'd never actually made stop motion up to that point. And so it was with those 2.5-inch Product Enterprise Daleks that I made my first ever YouTube animation, which was imaginatively titled Stop Motion Pilot, which was, I think it was about in the interim, I'd actually managed to get a ring modulator. This was long before I was aware of Audacity or any of that software. And I actually had a physical ring modulator and a really primitive speaker. And that was the first time I ever did the Dalek voices. And although that video still exists, I have no intention of uploading it because it's bloody awful. Certainly the Dalek voices are terrible in it. But that seemed to be quite well received at the time. And then about 6 months after that, that was when I did the animation that really started to capture people's attention, which was the little prequel I did using the Product Enterprise movie talking Daleks, again, the 2.5-inch range.
Ah, yeah.
And I wrote a 2.5-minute prequel to that. And that's really where it all began.
Right.
And it wasn't actually until 2008, when the classic series figures came out, that I ever did anything with the character options figures, even though they were the ones that gave me the idea in the first place.
That's really interesting because, yeah, the Product Enterprise mini Daleks, they're just so... I always wanted to do stuff with those, but I could never find like the movie set that you were talking about for your first animation. That was always like a holy grail thing. And
it became scarce quite quickly, didn't it?
I think seeing your prequel animation is pretty much what made me aware of those in the first place. And yeah, trying to find those like mint for a good price is absolutely insane.
I think the last time I looked on eBay, because I sold nearly all of the Product Enterprise stuff quite a while ago when classic Daleks started coming out in the character options range.
Yeah.
I pretty much got rid of all of my Dapol and all of the Product Enterprise stuff, because finally we had 5-inch classic Daleks. And only recently I thought, I wouldn't mind those movie Daleks back in the collection again. And I think the cheapest I could find them on eBay, and I think there were only about 2 sets, were about £85. And I thought, well, I'd rather spend the £85 on another character options set rather than Product Enterprise stuff.
It's just insane how much like the value of stuff just inflates, especially when it comes to like movie Dalek merchandise as well.
This is probably anticipating a later question, but to me, the movie Daleks are the best designed Daleks ever in the history of the program, and because they look so good, they make excellent action figures. And those Product Enterprise ones, the remote control ones, and the 2.5-inch, I think were the first time that we'd ever had decent movie Dalek merchandise, because the only other one was, again, in the Dapol range, when they did the so-called movie Dalek that had the claw.
Oh, yeah, I've got that one.
It was basically just a standard Dapol Dalek with a claw and a new gun attachment. There was nothing about it that made you think, oh, yeah, movie Dalek.
Precisely. So thank you for sharing that with us. It's very interesting. I think for me, YouTubers such as like yourself and like Batman March as well, he started with like new Who figures for his animations, and then went to classic as soon as they came out. Were you never tempted to do any new series stuff, or was it?
No,
No,
not at all.
not at
Not
all.
at all. I've made no secret of the fact that since 2005, the relaunch of the program just doesn't appeal to me at all. To me, it's a completely different show. It may as well be considered a separate entity. And I don't say that because I think I'm some old curmudgeonly misanthropic so-and-so, although I am. I was so excited. I can remember the day that they announced that Doctor Who was coming back. And I thought, fantastic, this is going to be really good. And to me, tonally, it has never, ever appealed at all. And I've continued to watch it
Yeah.
as a fan through every era. But there's so much of the new series that, to me, doesn't have a rewatchability factor. And so, therefore, a lot of the lore that's built up around the Time War and so on, I don't understand that continuity and I don't understand that lore. And so I don't feel that I could do a new series style animation simply because I don't think I'd get it right, if you know what I mean.
I understand that. Yeah.
Looking at it going, oh, but you forgot about this and you forgot about that. And what about this continuity issue? The only time I have actually made, you've just reminded me, I'd almost forgotten about this. Going back to 2008, the first character options animation I did was one featuring the new series Cybermen, and I think it was meant to be, I called it Death to the Cybermen. And again, it seemed to do quite well at the time. And I think I tied it in 2008, so I would have been tying it in with The Stolen Earth and Journey's End.
Okay.
And I've still got it somewhere, but I've never chosen to re-upload it on my current channel simply because it's not representative of my work. So I have actually done new series animation when I thought I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm just completely lost where the Moffat era is concerned. I watched a lot of those stories at the time, not having a clue what was going on, and I'd like to think I'm a relatively educated individual. I couldn't stand Moffat's writing style at all. So if I was going to delve into that in terms of the fiction, I just wouldn't know where to begin. Plus, I genuinely think that there has not been a really good monster, character, action figure from the new series that stands up to the ingenuity and the designs of the classic series monsters. And so to me, animation wise, it would always be focused on the classics, even though I would imagine now that we're sort of 17 years, no, not 17 years, is it 17 years? Yeah, it's 17 years since I started on YouTube. I would imagine that most of the people who are watching figure animations now are people half my age who have grown up entirely on the new series and have delved into the classics. And so my work probably doesn't have the same appeal for that audience, but I don't think I could write with any integrity a new series script.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I understand what you say about the monsters. We will get onto the next one eventually, but I think there's a lot to talk about in like the differences between classic and new Who, and I don't think people really address it enough. I've been thinking, like, looking at the Matt Smith stuff I've got and the David Tennant things, the monsters just aren't visually striking like they were in the classic series. Like, you look at an Axon and you think, that looks so cool, or a Crinoid, I mean, I know they're the same thing, or a Drashig, or a K1 Robot, or an Ice Warrior. And then the new series, you've got, I mean, I like the Silence, but they're an obvious Slenderman ripoff. Then you've got a Peg Doll Soldier, and I like the Ood, but they're very basic, and like there's nothing.
The thing is, one of the things that struck me, and I remember it really hit home when I was watching, is it Planet of the Dead, which was the first of those Tennant specials in 2009. And you had, was it the Tritovores that had the fly heads on the boiler suits? And I looked at that and thought, it's another alien that's got a human body and an alien head. And that seemed to me to be the only thing, really, that the designers were coming up with. All of the interesting designs, although I don't ever think they've got any of the classic ones absolutely right, with maybe the exception of the Ice Warrior. All of those designs are coming from and based on the classic series. I genuinely don't think, and I'm not looking for things to knock. I know that in this current climate, you're not allowed to say anything critical about the current series of Doctor Who, or Doctor Who post 2005. How dare you? You know, that's going to get you cancelled on Twitter. But I just don't think that there has been the level, as you were saying there, the inventiveness and the design and the distinctiveness of the monsters or the villains just hasn't been there. I don't think the series has been as inventive and varied as it was in the classic era.
Yeah, that is true. I'm going to just quickly look at a couple of comments. We've got quite a few people on. Hello, everyone. We've got 7 people.
Oh, good evening. Thank you for joining us.
Yep, thank you very much. We've got Dalek Apocalypse. Hello, Dalek Apocalypse. Previous.
Oh, yes, I know Dalek Apocalypse. He's commented on a few of my videos.
Harry Alpha.
Oh, yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Scribble to Screen. Harry Moorcroft. Says he loves the Sylvester McCoy outfit. And let's have a look. And someone said extraordinary previews on the 7th Doctor animation for me. Thank you very much. Let's have a look.
Probably tuning in going, who on earth is this? I
don't
remember him. Who is this old sod who's been around far too long?
Ozzy, how much of that collection do you use in your Doctor Who figure adventure? Well, I don't know. I've kind of got like a big box of spares, which I'm going to make some like custom stuff for my figure adventures soon. But the funny thing is, a lot of the action figures really tailor-made for the new series figures way back when they started it. But now it seems like they hardly care about the new stuff in the B&M wave. Yeah, I mean, they don't really... The merchandise in Doctor Who nowadays, like, you think... we haven't even got a Pating figure, and like that's Chris Chibnall's signature monster or whatever, and we don't even have one of those.
Well, if that's his signature monster, I think that's reason enough for him to quit right now.
I know, it pretty much says quite a lot.
I think the issue as well is that apart from, you know, back in the what some fans call the golden age, you know, in 2008, when you would go into Toys R Us and you'd see the massive displays, and I thought that was brilliant. You know, if the one thing that, I mean, even though the new series is not to my taste, at least has brought it back into the public consciousness, and we wouldn't have the classic line without the success of the new series figures. But I just don't think now they sell as well as the classics. And I know, you know, if you go into different B&Ms, you'll see different shelf warmers and so on. But my experience tends to be, certainly shopping in the B&Ms around my way, is that more often than not, it is the new series figures which are left on the shelf, more so than the classic series stuff. And I think that's one of the reasons. I mean, I might be completely wrong because I'm no expert on the merchandise, but I think Al Juar and Character Options have realised that the collector's market is primarily for the classics rather than the new series stuff. And I just think that, I mean, you only have to look at eBay and, you know, you've got lots of 50, 60, 70 new series figures and they're fetching 10 quid. Nobody seems to want them. I certainly don't want them. And I don't think they have that same collector's appeal. I mean, I was only in B&M the day before yesterday, and although the one in my hometown is not always very well stocked with the Doctor Who figures, most of the shelf was full of the second of the Companions of the 13th Doctor.
It's set. The same in mine as well. And they got some of the first ones as well. They just won't budge at all.
I mean, I don't know whether I'm anticipating possibly something you were planning to ask a little bit later, but I think there is a little bit of a problem personally with the selection of figures in the B&M sets, and I'm not certain that the recent waves, certainly not of 2020, I don't think they have had as much appeal to the casual buyer as the ones in 2019, for example, because another offender, going not to the new series but to the classic series, but the other set which my B&M has struggled to seem to shift is the second of the companions of the Fourth Doctor, because how appealing are the Sarah Jane and the Romana figures to the casual buyer? Probably not very appealing at all. You can imagine somebody looking at that and going, oh, it's three almost identical figures. We know they're not.
Yeah,
And we want Romana and we wanted classic Sarah Jane. But I just don't think they seem to have missed the trick this year by not having more monster figures in the packs.
That's what I was going to say.
That
Yeah.
Terror of the Zygon set, which I can see just over there.
There's no Zygon in it.
No, why not have a Zygon in it? Exactly.
Yeah.
Why not? I know it came out. Was it 2 or 3 years ago in one of the B&M waves?
Re-released one, didn't they? Yeah.
Just how appealing is. I mean, I wasn't interested in the Fourth Doctor figure in that set, and the 2 unit soldiers. Okay, the Benton was good, but to me, they're just a bit too samey on the shelf. They should have had a Zygon figure in it, and I think that if the B&M waves are going to continue to be successful, which I hope they are, I think they need to start focusing more on the monsters, even if it means re-releasing tweaked versions of figures we might have already had and packaging it with new companions and new head sculpts and so on. I just don't think to the general buyer a pack of 3 human figures is appealing enough, but that's just my opinion.
I completely get you, to be honest. I've been pretty much thinking the same thing. I feel like we kind of opened up that can of worms now. We might as well just get it all out and talk about it. I kind of miss them doing waves of figures, because the 3.75 inch line, we all try and forget it ever happened. But one thing I think it did quite well was the selection of figures. Personally, I thought that putting like a David Tennant with a mutant scoop Dalek and a gold Dalek and a planet Dalek, and just having this variety of things for you to look at on the shelf of like 6 separate figures, and you go, I've already got that one, I won't bother with that one, or I've already got it, but I'll army build. Oh look, a new David Tennant figure, I'll get that. Whereas I think the 3 packs, like you said, it's really, they're just missing the monster thing and missing like the variety thing. I think it's too niche and too story specific.
Yes, that's why I was surprised. I did raise it in a video which I took down simply because it wasn't really the sort of thing that I do on my channel. I made a video which I released for about a day looking back at the B&M sets from last year. And it was essentially, my point was, they need to be able to make the B&M sets more generally appealing. And something like, for example, when they released that fantastic Jungles of Mechanus set as the online exclusive, that was great. But I imagine that if that had gone into the shops, that would have sold very well. Whereas something which is more niche, and I think that word is absolutely spot on, like the Romana figures, maybe they should have been the online exclusive, because only fans want a Romana figure.
It's true.
It's not the sort of thing you would expect to see on general release. But as I say, I'm talking as somebody who does not know the toy industry, who does not know the collector's industry. I'm just the consumer.
Yeah. I do kind of find probably when we talk about Series 11 and Series 12 and the current state of the show, we'll get onto this in a bit. But I feel like there's a bit of a toxic positivity in terms of the character options stuff. Because I've signed up to be on the mailing list, and when I get them, I try and be as fair as I can. I say, right, this is good, this could be improved. I don't do what I used to do and say, oh, this is terrible, why is the mesh on an Imperial Dalek? What I said is, I basically said, if it really bothers you, you can get a bit of sanding paper and fix it yourself, but I would rather wait a bit longer for them to change the sculpt. And I think that people are being a little bit too dismissive on going, oh, why are you complaining, it's fine. I got a comment on that video saying, I thought you were being too harsh. And I said, I wasn't being harsh, I was being really fair.
Well, I think it reflects the current climate that you are not allowed to say anything critical about Doctor Who. And it's been like that for quite some time. And certainly the merchandise, I mean, to me, the mesh on the Imperial Daleks didn't bother me. I know it's completely inaccurate, but, you've really got to scrutinize it to see it. And it meant that Imperial Daleks were widely available. However, you make a fair point about the use of the mesh. But I think the reason that when you were saying about the toxic positivity and this you've got to say nice things about everything that comes out about Doctor Who. And my theory is people won't speak out against the shortcomings of the new series because they're terrified it'll be cancelled again. And people won't be critical about the new merchandise in case that gets cancelled again. Whereas, you can be completely objective about these things and realise that there are certain shortcomings, and for some people it will bother them and others it won't.
At the end of the day, it's all up to the buyer. Like, you pay with your wallet, it's all up to you whether you buy it or not.
You see, the thing is, talking about paying with your wallet, if they'd put, say, for example, the Monster of Peladon Sarah Jane with a re-released Ice Warrior with a darker wash, for example, to reflect the Monster of Peladon, I would have bought 5, 6 of those sets. As it is, I bought 2 of those Companions of the Fourth Doctor sets, and that was it. There was no point buying multiple. I always like to have a couple just in case, a leg snaps off or whatever when it's being animated with. But that was the limit. 2 was the limit for that because I didn't need any more. But had they put an Ice Warrior or, waited until they re-released, say, one of the Destiny of the Daleks or the Destiny Davros and put that with Romana too, again, I probably would have bought multiples of that, but I'm not the one making the decisions.
It's true. Right, we'll go. I'll just read a couple of comments and then I will go on to the questions which you guys submitted earlier. Harry says, I'm almost finishing a custom on the Dalek time controller from the Big Fish Audios using original Day of the Daleks from 2009 original. That's cool. I've never...
Oh, yes, I've seen some of the photos of Harry's work in progress, and it's looking very promising. I don't know anything about the Dalek time controller because I don't listen to Big Finish very often. But it does look like an interesting variant, and I've seen Harry's work in progress on that. It's good.
I think, for me, this is a little bit of a tangent on, 3D printing and stuff. I would much rather get something like that 3D printed than go through all the hassle of cutting the neck and everything. I just really want to wait until somebody models it, or I'll try it myself.
Oh, I have no customizing skill at all beyond a very basic repaint. So yes, I'd be the same with that
one. Harry says, TheCyberPlanner, I really enjoyed your behind the scenes on how you made the set, and it was incredibly useful. As you had to make an action figure set for university. Oh, there was no question, it was just a comment, but yeah, that's true, the box file thing is a really good method, and I use that as well.
Well, years ago, I used to use mounting card, and I used to cut it and put a 90-degree angle in one of the walls, and then sort of bolster it with blue tack, and that worked, but it was time-consuming because you had to cut everything to the size you wanted, and quite by chance, I thought I had tons of box files lying around, and I thought, well, they're full of magazines and papers. They're fairly sturdy. You can make a right angle out of those, or a 45-degree wall, or whatever. And if you either put your own design on them, or print off one of the Action Figure Theatre designs, it works just as well, if not better, because you're less likely to knock the wall over.
That's always been a problem for me, just knocking stuff over all the time. Yeah, I'm actually...
I enjoyed making that behind-the-scenes video. I think it was Jacob Bellingham, I think it was, or was it Dewey on Twitter? They mentioned that they would like to see a little bit more about how I made the sets. So I put that up for a limited time, and that the box file thing in particular seemed to click with people. And the other thing, making control panels, because you're going to have those, rather than print off ream after ream of Action Figure Theatre stuff. I was in either the Range or Wilco and saw those plates that electricians use, plastic about that thick. And I thought, well, if you sprayed one of those silver and stuck a few little artifacts on, maybe a couple of printed out control panels, you've then got ready-made stuff that you can use over and over again, and it's not always looking like something off Action Figure Theatre, which is brilliant and a fantastic resource. But you do get tired of seeing the same sets over and over again because they tend to be reused in numerous animations, and quite rightly because the quality's high. But it just makes it a little bit more, I suppose, individual to my production.
I mean, it adds like an extra dimension when you put real objects in it. I mean, it's a rule of filmmaking anyway. Like the more real elements you put in it, the better it feels.
Yes. One of the things I noticed as well, I mean, I've not got one of the best printers in the world, and I've noticed that when you're doing close-ups of figures and you've got the Action Figure Theatre backdrop behind, and you can then start to see all the little pixelations in the ink, and you know, it doesn't look great.
Right, so we're gonna move on to the viewer questions now. I've printed them out in preparation because I didn't want to be faffing around. So first we've got from Soaring Egret 1985. Nice username. CyberPlanner, what's been your favourite animation that you've made so far? MonoSupreme, what's your favourite fan project you worked on? I'll let you answer that first.
I enjoy everything that I make at the time I'm making it. And then there are those that I look back on and think, well, that wasn't quite as good as one of the others. And I think it's a difficult question to answer, but the ones that I've most enjoyed are The Abomination, which I made in 2011.
Oh, yes.
I had no idea at all at the time that 10 years later it would be at 90,000 plus views. I really enjoyed writing that as well because I based the script from a couple of paragraphs in Ben Aronovich's novelization of Remembrance of the Daleks, where he fills in a little bit of the background of the Special Weapons Dalek. The rest of the script was all of my own making. And I really enjoyed that one because I think the Imperial Daleks are another of my favorite designs, and I love the voices of the Imperial Daleks as well. I like that higher frequency modulation, which you wouldn't want to hear all the time. So distinctive to the Imperial Daleks. So I enjoyed voicing that. I've enjoyed the fact that so many people have enjoyed it. And more recently, the one that I had an absolute whale of a time making was Horror of the Cybermen, which I did as the Halloween special, my one and only Halloween special so far, because I got to bring in elements of Frankenstein. And a custom of the Borad, which I had, and sort of mesh that together. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the, animating the creature coming to life, and, the sort of the homage to the films and also the novel where I nicked some of the dialogue. So that was something a bit different because it melded my love of horror, because after Doctor Who, horror is my greatest love, particularly vintage retro horror like the Universal films and Hammer films. So to bring in my love of that and meld it with Doctor Who. I was having a conversation with a very, very good friend of mine, and we were chatting about, what is Doctor Who? And he came up, the way because he's not a fan, but he's watched it for a long time, and he's read books and so on, but he wouldn't label himself a fan. He's just somebody who's interested in the programme. And he said to me exactly what I believe. Doctor Who works best when it's horror rather than science fiction. And I agree entirely. And so being able to blend that in the Horror of the Cybermen animation.
Hello, new series. Hello, new series. Why don't you try some horror? And God, the scariest thing in like the new era is just Chris Chibnall in general. But we'll talk about that later.
Look out, we'll be cancelled, Ozzy. We'll be cancelled.
Can't have an opinion on Chris Chibnall's writing?
Absolutely not. No, definitely not. We'll be down as NMDs, won't we?
Oh, God. Right.
We can talk more about that later.
That's a whole different can of worms. For me...
Open it.
My favourite project that I've worked on, I can't really answer this because I have like a thing where I always like to remaster my craft. I've kind of got a bit of a bad habit of going back and changing things. So as it stands, if we're going to talk about pure fun and pure love and enjoyment for a project, it would be a terribly made project, but we had so much fun making it. It was like a sketch we did about Stephen Moffat back in 2016, I think. It's I re-uploaded it onto the channel if anybody wants to go check that out. But that was just pure, just three mates just pissing around and just having a laugh, and that's just a time capsule, and like, look on that with so much joy. In terms of like filmmaking though, whilst the Cyberman film that I made was incomplete and it had quite a lot of plot holes, I'm still very proud of quite a lot of the cinematography that I managed to achieve in that. It's like the first time I ever properly tried filming a project, so that's like, in terms of achievement, that's my favourite, but in terms of enjoyment, the comedy sketches we used to do on the channel, the 73 Notch channel back in the day. So that's my answer. Have you ever thought about doing any comedy stuff, like maybe, because I know you did like the scalper thing, like that turned out to be quite a funny video.
Yes, and I enjoyed doing that. Again, that sort of blended my taste for the macabre with the world of Doctor Who.
Mm.
But although I haven't done it for many years, long before I was making Doctor Who films, I used to make very surreal um, horror films, I suppose you would call them. But they always had a sort of element of dark humor underneath it. And these are stories which, as I've grown older, I'm more interested now in writing short stories, and some of the ideas from those early films I'm working into either novellas or short stories. I'll give you an example. I wrote a film when I was in my 20s called Thanks Uncle Mike, which is basically about an awful party that takes place in a bedsit, where the corpse of the tenant's uncle is sat up in the armchair, and he chats to the corpse and everything and lets him join in with the party. And he has a brother who's always got a toilet roll held up to his eye and things like that, and just really daft, surreal, but also with the touch of the macabre.
Mm.
So I've made quite a few short films way back when. We are going back, nearly 20 years now. And I've also been involved in a few local feature films, both in terms of writing, acting, and producing. Again, a long time ago, but they're all part of my CV, I suppose you'd call it.
Nice. It's interesting to hear about that side of you, because I always did have the question in my mind whether you were new to like making film stuff just with the animation, or whether you had actually been involved in stuff before. And it's nice to explore that side of your career, as it were.
The other thing I do regularly now is, well, I say regularly, usually every 2 years, and we'll see when the next one will be, COVID permitting, but I also direct stage productions,
Oh, nice.
theatrical productions. So that's another thing that I do, beyond the realm of the Who-tuber.
Mm. Cool. Right, let's go on to the next question. For both of us, what made us start getting into animations? I think we kind of touched upon that, so rewind the video for that.
One of the key things about animation, and one of the reasons I continue to enjoy doing it, is because you have complete control over everything you are doing.
Mm.
And I know some figure animators worry about voice actors and so on. But because I tend to do most of that myself, with the occasional guest involved, if there's a small role, because the way I make animation, I will normally have come up with the idea, the script, shot it, edited it, and released it within a week.
Mm.
Because I'm always keen to get on to the next project. I don't like having the project goes on and on and on. So most of the time, the reason I do most of the voices is not because I like the sound of my own voice, simply because you know that if you're going to get other actors involved, you've got to give them a little bit more notice, and quite rightly.
Yeah.
You can't just say, can I have a line in 2 days, please? But having that complete control over your cast, your sets, your lighting, what's going on, that's another appealing thing about animation.
Mm. Yeah, I totally get that, because it is a bit of a pain.
You're frozen.
Oh, have I frozen?
Have we got a technical hitch?
Are we back?
Oh no, you're back again. You're back again.
I'll just move on to the next one. I'll try and get through these a bit quicker, because there's quite a few.
I'll stop talking.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. It printed on 2 pages for some reason, when it should have just printed on 1. CyberPlanner, since you were the original... hang on. No, I read that one. Have you any plans to extend the podcasts, and can we look forward to seeing more YouTubers? I would like to. Hopefully this one does reach more people and maybe get some interest from, I don't know, Saxon, Batman March, those kind of things. Maybe even Channel Pup or something like that. It would be quite nice. But
So what was that? So what was that one about the original? I don't remember. You read a
oh,
question about the original. I don't remember that one.
oh no, it was for both of you. What made us get started into animation, especially since the CyberPlanner was one of the original Doctor Who animators.
Oh yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. Really enjoyed your Halloween special on October, and loves the sound cues that you used from the Frankenstein. And are you a fan of those movies? I'll let you expand on that a bit more while I
Yes,
read
very
these.
much so, very much so. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, my greatest love after Doctor Who is horror, and my favourite novel of all time is Frankenstein. And so in that particular animation, I was very much paying homage to those movies. And you are absolutely right. I nicked the sound effects, not from the 1931 film actually. It was from Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. That was very much the background noise in the lab, but it was lifted from one of the Universal films.
Cool. So where do you get your ideas for the animations, and could you please do more behind the scenes, because your set design video was really enlightening. I'll kind of interject on this. Like, are you gonna maybe do it on the editing process? Do you think you'd... It covers another question as well, like what editing software do you use, and I don't know, would you show us the editing process of how you actually put it together in the edit?
Well, the editing process to watch is incredibly boring because it's time consuming. And I don't think it's visually interesting. However, the way I edit is before I actually lay any of the voices down on the timeline, I edit sequences. So, for example, this practical demonstration here, ladies and gents, if I've animated an action figure, so for example, if I've got a figure that turns its head like that, that's all I will shoot. I will shoot the head turning like that. And then in the edit, I'll put that together and then I'll reverse it. So I'll make sure I've got that. Same with arm movements. And obviously you have certain sequences which are only taking place once, like a character moves from one part of the set to the other, or there's a battle or whatever. And I will edit all of that together. I'll edit each one of those sequences together before I then lay the voice track down, and then just put the clips which are going to be the most useful. And I always try to get plenty of still shots of heads and so on, because the thing about action figures is that action figures of the humanoid characters are not that interesting to animate. The Daleks, ironically, are more interesting to animate than the humanoid characters. Cybermen, for example, you can't even turn the head.
No.
So therefore, you've got to start doing all of this rather artificial pivoting with them. But at least it gives a little bit of movement. But then I make sure that I get plenty of fake close-ups from different angles, just so that even in a 2.5, 3 minute piece, I've got about 35 to 50, depending on the animation, different shots that I can use in that sequence. Because the last thing you want, even in a short piece, like the animations I make, is a shot of figures standing there doing nothing for too long. And that's one of the shortcuts. And that's why one of the things I would always say to anybody who is interested in doing stop motion, it doesn't actually have to be that time consuming. I mean, okay, if you want to do something of the quality of, say, Mondas Productions or Tailored Vision or Batman March, then yeah, it's going to take you a long time. But if you're an old hack like me who is quite happy to churn them out, you can do it. I can film, and this is absolutely the case. It's certainly been the case with certain of my Dalek films, not all of them, but some of my Dalek films, I have shot everything in 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I get all of the shots that I need, and then The time-consuming part is the editing. Because ultimately, although it's brilliant when you have all of these figure animations with the bangs and the flashes and the fancy special effects, I have neither the expertise nor the technology to do that, nor do I want to be spending weeks and months on a project. So what works for me may well work for other people as well, as long as you're not expecting, sort of Hollywood style spectacle. But then I'm making classic series, so it doesn't have to look like
Yeah, that's true.
a Hollywood.
But if you take the Big Finish route, then you can pretty much do whatever with the classic Doctors, really. Because
Yes, but the thing is, I mean, going on to Big Finish, if you don't mind a very quick, I don't mind Big Finish, and I dip in occasionally, but there's just too much of it. And, when you've got all the different Doctors meeting at different points, I'm confused. I gave up on Big Finish a long time ago, and I don't know where to step back in, because there just seems to be so much of it and too many crossovers. I think it's become a little bit silly.
Yeah, I mean, I can totally agree with that, because my friend Mana's trying to get me into Big Finish, and while the ones I've listened to I have enjoyed, it's just the massive back catalogue of stuff really does put me off, because I think if I listen to an episode from the Eighth Doctor's era, like halfway through, I will probably need to know quite a lot, because it's just the nature of like how that kind of Doctor Who works. There's arcs, which carry on, and like I listened to, I think it was Terra Firma, and there was a companion that I didn't even know who he was. Didn't even know whether he was human or not.
I listened to Terra Firma when it came out. I didn't have a clue what was going on.
A bit of an exclusive for you guys, because you guys are awesome. The people who watch the live streams, you're my favourites. I'm just going to give you a bit of a sneak peek of a Terra Firma custom.
Ooh.
Here we are.
Oh, was that? I saw those on eBay, and I wondered whether to buy one. Isn't that fantastic? That is superb.
It's a very fun project to do. I still need to paint the base, obviously.
Very good.
But yeah, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of contention over what colour the sense globes are, but I'm going with gold, because I don't know whether you saw in the Remembrance of a Dalek's bonus features, there's like this animation where they animated a few segments from the Davros Big Finish stories, and there's a segment where you see the Terra Firma Emperor, and he looks like that. Have you seen that?
A long time ago. Is that on the Davros disc?
I'm not sure.
Disc that came. I did see some of those, but it's a long, long time.
And part 2 for Terra Firma. This will probably confuse people at first, and then you'll. This is also a work in progress, but if it actually bothers to focus, ignore the unpainted base. Do you see what I've done? Because on the cover art they used Product Enterprise Daleks.
Oh yes, that's right. They did, didn't they?
So
yes.
I took a accurate 3D printed Imperial Dalek, if you can see it, and I modified it to look more like a 60s one. So
excellent work. Excellent work.
Thank you very much. I know I have a life outside of Doctor Who, I swear, I promise. Right, let's go on to the next question. Let's skim through these. Are there any other franchises, apart from Doctor Who and Sonic, this is for me, Doctor Who and Sonic, that I'd like to talk about or collect? No, I can't collect anymore. If you just look at my room, it should tell you I have no room for anything. What Doctor Who stories do you feel is really underappreciated? Now, that's not really one I can answer, because I'll let you go first for the unappreciated Doctor Who.
Well, there are two. There are two in particular, both from the classic series, that I champion repeatedly. So forgive me if there's anybody watching who's been on Twitter. You'll know all about this. Two Doctor Who stories which get a terrible, terrible rap, but are actually really good. At least I think they are. One is The Dominators, and the other is The Twin Dilemma.
I've never seen
and
The Twin
I've
Dilemma.
never understood why The Twin Dilemma has come bottom of fan polls for over a decade. And I also don't get what people are going on about when they call The Dominators boring. To me, it's one of those that there is a certain fan mentality, because I'm not a huge fan of fandom, if that makes sense. There is a huge fan mentality, which I think is like a herd mentality. Everybody says that's rubbish, so I'll go along with it. And I'm sorry, but something like there's very few classic stories that I can't enjoy. There's a minority, one of which is Underworld. Underworld is an absolutely dreadful production on every level. Badly written, badly produced. Tom Baker sleepwalks through it. The plot is almost incomprehensible. Another of Bob Baker and Dave Martin's stinkers, because they had a fair feud, did Bob Baker and Dave Martin. Are you seriously telling me that Underworld is a better story than The Twin Dilemma? Now, I love The Twin Dilemma. I can see all of its flaws, and I absolutely love it. And it means a great to me nostalgically. But even being objective, and I remember, I think it was Sea Devil Lagoon, who I communicate with quite often on Twitter and YouTube. I think it was he that said to me, it's because Underworld has the Tom Baker bias.
Right.
I think there is still that aspect of, there are certain people that can't take to Colin Baker's tenure. But I think the Twin Dilemma and the Dominators deserve a lot more appreciation than they get. I mean, the Dominators is nowhere near the worst Troughton story, never mind one of the worst classic stories. I know the Space Pirates with it being missing, but I find the Space Pirates a slog to get through on audio, and even the surviving episode is not particularly entertaining. The Dominators is a lot less boring than the Ice Warriors, for example. But again, they tend to be stories that end up above the Dominators in polls. But that's just, again, it's just my opinion.
And that's the key word, just your opinion.
Yeah, just my opinion.
I know.
But feel free to cancel me if you like. You won't be missed.
Yeah, I'll go on to this later when we do talk about the Doctor Who fandom, but I did kind of... when you accidentally wind somebody up and you didn't even realise, you just stated your opinion and then it just really annoyed them and you thought, what did I do? I just said I liked something and they just went on a massive tangent. But anyway, so underrated stories. If we're going to talk classic, I've not seen much classic Who this year, I'd say. Well, over the past couple of years, I've kind of been binging the modern stuff because it had been a while since I'd watched the modern stuff, and I thought, you know what, I'll binge it. I never hated Time Lash. I never understood
I
the
love
hate
Time
for that.
Lash.
Yeah, it was...
I love Time Lash.
I mean, it's the Borad, isn't it? It's been a while since I've seen
yes,
it. Yeah,
one of the best villains in the series history. He saves the whole mess, and bits of it are a mess.
Yeah.
But it's still very, very entertaining.
I mean, I think that's just the current run of Who isn't entertaining. It's not interesting. But I mean, we'll get onto that later. I know I'm teasing a lot with we'll do that later, but we will look forward to it. Okay, let's have a look. Really enjoyed your story, Triumph for the Daleks, and loved your version of the backstory for the origin of the Dalek paradigm. Thank you. That is going to be re-uploaded. I'm sure you knew with upscaled up to 1080p from whatever resolution it was, new effects and all that kind of stuff. Check out that video if you haven't. Harry thinks it's my best figure animation. Yeah, thanks. I mean, I spent all that time on those 7 other stories, and that one which I filmed first was the best. Oh well, no, thank you. I appreciate that. Aside from Doctor Who, what else are you both into? For me, I mean, obviously Sonic, but I'm not super full on into it like I used to be. I used to be into Slipknot and like mask collecting, but I kind of came out of that hobby because it was very, very expensive. If you think this is expensive, try spending £175 on a mask, and you will be broke. So I got out of that hobby. I love Star Wars. I like the original 6. When it comes to the Disney stuff, I'm not, I don't hate it, but I'm just not overly keen on it. I'm not fussed. I'm interested to hear what you think about Star Wars, prequels, original trilogy, and Disney.
Well, I'm very much an original trilogy man.
Right.
You know, they were a very important part of my childhood. The very first action figure franchises I ever collected were the Star Wars Kenner line and Masters of the Universe. They were the toys of my childhood until Dapol came along in 1988 with the Doctor Who stuff. The prequels, they were one of those things that I really, really looked forward to and was bitterly disappointed by every single one of them. And I've only seen the Force Awakens of the Disney stuff, apart from Rogue One, which was tediously dull up until Darth Vader came into it for about
Yeah.
2 minutes, and then it went back to being dull again. Although I was interested. Peter Cushing is my favourite actor of all time, and I was interested to see him appear in it from beyond the grave. I thought that was an interesting idea to bring a dead actor back to life, or rather, a character
Yeah.
played by a dead actor back to life. I didn't think that was tasteless at all. I thought it was done. I thought it was done very well. But I will go back and enjoy the original trilogy over and over again. But the prequels, no interest in seeing those again.
No.
And although I didn't mind The Force Awakens, it didn't make me think, oh yeah, I'm going to watch the other. I'm not really that invested in the characters to want to watch the other two, to be honest.
For me, the only interesting character in the sequel trilogy was Kylo Ren. He was the only one who actually had an arc, and you could actually see where his character went. Whereas here, I'm gonna go on the Daisy Ridley tangent and say her character was very, very just not interesting whatsoever. When you have a character that can do everything, it's like, well, I know she's not gonna die. Like, there was a fight scene in The Last Jedi, and I thought she's not gonna get hurt. I just know nothing's gonna happen, and nothing happened. So that's kind of when I checked out when it came to Disney Star Wars. Was the Last Jedi. I didn't hate it as much as some people did, but I just knew that I wasn't going to get anything from this. For me, the prequels, I grew up on the prequels more than the original trilogy. Because like at my grandparents' house, they had like the prequels on VHS, and I think they had, was it Empire or A New Hope? They had one of the original ones, but it was mainly the prequels. So I watched those over and over again. So that's my Star Wars, and like the whole Lego Star Wars saga thing. That's my era. But obviously, I love the originals just as much as the prequels because of just how much they did for film in general. There's no denying the amazing craft that went on. But I just
See, one of the things I have to constantly remember in this social media era is that most of the people who are interacting with my videos are half my age, which makes me feel very old.
Yeah. I mean, to an extent, I forget that I'm 20 sometimes, and I get people who are, like much younger than me. I think, oh yeah, I was that age once, and people ask me these questions. And I think, wait, you surely, and then you think, oh wait, no, it's a kid. I'll be nice on them because there's no point getting angry
Well,
at a kid.
I had a lovely comment on the Abomination earlier this week, and it was, I forget the username of the individual. I think he's fairly new to YouTube, and I think he's interacted a few times on Instagram as well. And he said, oh, I remember watching The Abomination when it came out, and I was 10, and I thought, oh, bloody hell, I was 31.
Yeah.
When I released that.
Oh.
So yeah, you suddenly realize. And one of the other things, I couldn't believe this. When I came back to doing the YouTube stuff after a long time away, mainly because I had no action figures to do any animating with, because when I bought my house, nearly all of the character options stuff went. But when I was able to start collecting it back again, and Sea Devil Lagoon got in touch with me, and he said, you were a fixture. Your videos were a fixture of my childhood. I thought, my God, the idea that somebody's grown up with your work and remembers your work fondly. These tiny, zero budget, irrelevant videos that I make. And yet it's something to somebody. And I suppose that's another reason for keeping doing it. Maybe in another 10 years, when I'm nearly drawing my pension, if I'm still doing this, somebody else might say, "Oh yeah, I remember your horror of the Cybermen video. I watched that when I was 8."
Yeah, it's crazy. When I'm feeling unmotivated to continue doing this stuff, I remember that p- especially comments about trying for the Daleks. It's like it means a lot because I just did it for me and I just put it out there because I enjoyed it. And it's easy to forget over time that the purpose of the video was just enjoyment. And when you pursue like filmmaking, you kind of do forget about just the raw fun energy of doing that kind of
And
stuff.
that's how it should be.
Mm,
And I know I probably sound like a complaining old man. I don't care. There's a lot to moan about. One of the things that annoys me a bit about the current state of social media and YouTube in particular is going back to when I was first doing this in 2006, 2007, and 2008, which was when I was, making quite a few videos that were doing very well. There was none of this constant push for subscribers.
no.
Subscribe to me, subscribe to me. And even individuals whose work I respect, I am not comfortable constantly asking for attention
Mm,
and subscribe to me this and subscribe to me that. And that to me takes a lot of the enjoyment out of it, because you suddenly think, I'm in competition with these people. And they think, no, hang on a minute. I'm doing it because of the enjoyment. I'm not scrabbling for subscribers. I passed 1,000 subscribers just before Christmas. That's great. But
yeah.
I have no intention whatsoever and no delusions that I'm going to make money out of this, or I'm going to become a celebrity fan. And that's another of the things that annoys me about the sort of the cliques that develop as a result of social media and on Twitter and YouTube. You're sort of in with this crowd, and I will never be in crowds because that, again, that age difference thing and that outlook thing. And you think, well, you getting something out of it. I don't make these videos to get thousands of views. The fact that some of them do get 2,000-3,000 views within a few months, that's great that other people are enjoying them. But ultimately, I've done it because I wanted to do it, and I was going to have fun doing the Dalek voices, and I was going to have fun, writing the script and animating it and all of those things. And what you just said then, you did it because you were enjoying it. That to me is what it should be all about, and not this constant, attention seeking is the only way to describe it. So, click on this and subscribe to me. I only need 3 more subscribers to get to 1,000. Make sure you get. What does it matter,
Yeah.
really, in the scheme of things? What does it matter?
I mean, I couldn't put it any better myself. I think I kind of needed that as well because I've kind of been stressing a lot about what am I doing YouTube for, because I'd put out content where it was to try and get new fans in, but then you think that's kind of it's not why I do this. It's not passion. It's
You
just
see, I'd
wanting.
rather have quality than quantity. And one
Mm,
of the things that I really appreciate about the people who watch my videos is that many of them will comment repeatedly on
mm,
videos. That's what I'm interested in. That I'm interested in that little interaction that you can have with somebody who actually takes the time to comment on a video rather than just clicking a like or dislike, as it may be. And a video can have 100 views and 5 comments, and it's the comments I'm interested in, not the views.
mm. I kind of do wish though. I do put a lot of the fault on YouTube itself. I mean, obviously, like with pretty much a lot of other big companies, like they really should just make the views not visible to the actual audience, because I kind of feel like there is like a flock herd mentality of let's go to the video with 100,000 views instead of the video with 10 views, because what does that guy's opinion matter,
Yeah.
it's
I also think they need to, so I think that's a very good point. And the other thing I think they need to stop doing is anonymizing likes and dislikes. Because
yeah.
the problem with I mean, the dislikes, I'm actually quite delighted that there's one person who dislikes every single, I'm assuming it's the same person
Oh, it
who
will be,
dislikes
yeah.
every single one of my videos. It makes me feel like I've arrived, that I have a hater who probably hates the fact that my Dalek voices are better than his,
Yeah.
and I've got more action figures than him, and I've got more subscribers than him, or whatever it might be that makes him click that dislike. But I am interested to see who likes the video. You know, you see who likes your Twitter posts and you see who likes your Instagram posts.
Yeah.
Why do YouTube insist on keeping the likes anonymous? Because at least if you can see who's liked your video, you can get a feel for who might be interacting with your work on a regular basis.
I mean, that's true. I mean, another thing about, like, commenting, I do wonder why I don't get so many comments, but then I ask myself, I don't really comment on videos that much anyway. I only comment on videos where I'm interested in the person making it and, you know, just sharing that enthusiasm.
Well, that does bring me to another point, which I promise I will keep brief. Going back to what I was saying before about attention seeking, another thing that irritates me about fandom, particularly in the HooTube community, is that you get a lot of people, you know, wanting your feedback and your comments and your likes, and they'll ask you to be involved in certain productions or whatever. But there's no evidence that they have ever supported you back. And I think it's a shame when there isn't that mutual support, when it's all about, you know, you help me, but I'm not going to do anything for you, even comment on your video or, you know, retweet something you've put on Twitter. And one of the things that I've always tried to do, particularly, I think it's because of my age and my profession, and I'm being interested in promoting the work of other people who've done talented things, and you retweet stuff and so on, and then, you know, you find that you're not getting the same support in return. And I don't do it for the return support. Sometimes you think, why have I never heard from so and so? I've done voices for them, you know, I've done this or I've done that, but then you get nothing back from those individuals. And I think that's a shame, really, because it's supposed to be, as I said before, a community.
I agree. We're just going to take a quick break now because my camera battery's dying. So professionalism. So I will. We'll see you guys in a couple of minutes. So I'll put the break display up now. This is the first time I've ever used it. Wait. There we go.
Will I have a chance to get another drink, Ozzy, while you're doing that?
Yeah, you'll be okay.
Right, I won't be long.
See you in a minute. Right, are we?
Right, I'm back in a different Doctor Who mug.
Oh, nice, nice. I've got a Doctor Espresso mug. That's about it. Right, I think we're done with the Q&A questions now. We'll go on to the questions we've prepared. So I won't answer these. I'll just go off of your opinions because I answered them in the previous podcast. So your favourite and least favourite episodes of Classic Who and New Who?
New Who, not a single one of them.
Okay.
Although the one of the ones that I have rewatched more than others is Victory of the Daleks, which I think is really quite entertaining. I mean, love the paradigm or hate them, I think it's a good episode. And one of the things that I would really like to see is Mark Gatiss as showrunner, because one of the things that I've noticed going through Who since its revival in 2005 is I tend to enjoy his episodes more than any others. So the Victory of the Daleks is probably my favourite New Who episode, but that's not saying much. Classic, least favourite I've already mentioned, Underworld. Favourite would have to be Remembrance of the Daleks, because it was the story that made me a fan. And to be an 8-year-old when that went out was something special. Up until that point, Doctor Who was something that I took an interest in and watched it when I could. My first memory of Doctor Who was the scene in Resurrection of the Daleks when the Dalek is pushed out of the warehouse. I can remember vividly certain sequences in Colin Baker's tenure. My clearest memories of Doctor Who up to that point was season 24, because I watched all of those episodes when they went out. And so because I'd become more interested in Doctor Who as season 24 came out, when Remembrance of the Daleks was on, that was just something else. And it's an episode which remains, a serial. You're not supposed to say episodes, are you? Because there's 4 episodes. You don't want to upset the Twitter fraternity. Right. It's a serial which means a great deal to me. And I can watch it now and really get quite emotional because it means so much. And I know it sounds like really trite, but that changed my life. If it wasn't for Remembrance of the Daleks, I don't think I'd be a Doctor Who fan. So that would be my favourite serial of all time.
I mean, I agree with you about Remembrance. It was my delve into the classic era. I can't really remember how I started watching Doctor Who. It's very blurred. I remember watching Rose, Dalek, Parting of the Ways, and Remembrance, but I can't remember the order. But I remember Remembrance was always, the action-packed one, the real awesome one, and it kind of got me obsessed with like different types of Daleks and stuff. And yeah,
you see that thing? I mean, all those Dalek action sequences. I mean, to an 8-year-old. And the other thing that you really can't underestimate is that my primary school was quite a large primary school. It had at one time been a secondary school. And this is in the 1980s, when schools still looked like they were from the 50s and 60s. And so the school, in Remembrance of the Daleks, looked like my school inside.
Oh, God.
And you used to be able to, they had these really long corridors. And if you used to go on a message for the teacher, or you went to the toilet or whatever, you could just imagine a Dalek floating up the stairs and coming around the corner, and the idea of the Daleks in the cellar and things like that. To an 8-year-old, that was just magic.
I mean, that story terrified me, but there's one shot in that episode which still shits me up to this day. It's when you're talking about him going up the stairs, it's the one where Ace is knocked out and she headbutts the headmaster, and then she opens the door and the Doctor falls through. The bit where you see the Dalek still levitating, that was so terrifying because it felt so real. It's a masterclass in like 1980s television filmmaking. It's just brilliant.
It is. There is something very special about it. You can tell that they were having a great time doing it. It was one of those serials. It was one of those serials where everything just seemed to gel together and make perfection. And although there is a lot of classic Doctor Who that I have time for, even those episodes which people don't tend to like, objectively, there are not that many perfect episodes. Remembrance is one. Spearhead from Space is another. That's another of those where everything seems to come together to make something which is, to use a modern phrase, God tier.
Right.
And Daleks is one of those.
Cool. Yeah. So I was kind of interested that you said Victory, but because I find it, I used to absolutely adore it, and I can quote it from start to finish. I've seen it that many times, and I'm sure it's no secret that I am a fan of the Power Ranger Daleks. But yeah, I completely understand people's rebuttals with that episode, because it was I think it was a bit of a messy way to introduce new Daleks. I thought it. I don't necessarily have. I don't have a problem with the production team designing a set of Daleks which just look like they could be sold as toys. I personally don't have an issue with that, but I think the episode itself looked way too glossy, and the fact it was in a silver spaceship, and that didn't even look like a Dalek spaceship. And the whole purpose of that scene was to make your eyes go, look at these brand new Daleks, and let's just forget about the mediocre way they've been introduced. And I don't know, I have very mixed feelings now. But it's one of those yeah.
I don't mind the design of the paradigm, apart from that awful humped back, which they did streamline, didn't they? I think that the unforgivable thing about the paradigm is the way in which they just seem to be forgotten.
Yeah.
It was a concept that you could, and this again is one of the issues with the way the program is made today. Clearly they thought, oh, we've got this brilliant idea, and suddenly they realize that it's not been particularly well received by fandom, so they sort of pretend it didn't happen and sort of push it to one side. I've recently, I never loved the paradigm. I didn't mind, mainly because the concept didn't go anywhere. But a little bit of a plug here, not for one of my productions, but I've recently voiced the paradigm for a forthcoming production by Rob Jones, Mondas Productions, and he's written a really, really interesting script exploring what the Eternal Dalek was meant to be. And I thought, good on him, because they come out with all of this is the Eternal, and it was never mentioned again. What was the point narratively?
It was ridiculous how they just didn't bother to do anything with them. Oh, never mind. That's a topic for a video in and of itself. But right, let's go on to future video ideas. I've rambled on about that in my videos, so I'll just let you take that one away.
Well, I'm currently working on my first multi-part Doctor Who story.
Ooh.
Each episode is only going to be about 5 minutes long. The first part is already out. It's called Beyond Galaxy 5. And it's sort of meant to be a sequel to Monster of Peladon, bringing elements of the Brain of Morbius into it, because the big reveal in this trivial animation, the big reveal at the end is that that it's Morbius who appears and does a deal with this rogue faction of Ice Warriors and a rogue faction of Sontarans, trying to get together an army which he's then going to march with on Gallifrey. So that's in the short term. Beyond that, I don't know, because, and I think I might be anticipating one of your questions here about ideas. Most of the ideas I get and the scripts that I write are based around, quite simply, the figures that I want to use. So if I have a particular desire to have and feature a particular figure, then I'll write a script for it. And that's why, when they give advance notice of what's coming out in the B&M waves, the first thing I will think of is, all right, well, when that comes out, I'll write a script about this. So I'll do that particular animation. So it all revolves around the figures that I want to use at any given time.
That's fair enough. That's interesting. I kind of always tend to write myself into a corner in the fact that I make my productions a bit too big for myself to handle, and I really need to rein it in.
I'm very strict with myself when it comes to the writing. 1 page is it for an episode at most, because for no disrespect to him, because he did incredible work and he's done brilliantly for himself. He is a YouTube legend, Batman March.
Mm.
After watching his episodes for the first time, I didn't go back and rewatch them because I don't really want to sit and watch 20, 25 minutes of a figure animation. To me, YouTube is about short chunks, maximum 5 minutes. And that's why I've tended to go with short fragments of little tantalizing details of stories that could be, or like episodes within episodes, like the one I did before Christmas that was set during Planet of the Daleks, when they have the conversation about the bacteria bomb. I'd rather make something like that than an ongoing saga with episodes lasting 15, 20, 25 minutes. To me, that's not what YouTube is about. So although I've resisted doing multi-part stuff, because people have said to me, when are you going to do a feature-length project? Never is the answer, because it doesn't interest me. But maybe having a go at a 4 or 5 or 6-part story where each part is about 5 minutes long, that would be about my limit as far as it goes. Because, as I said before, when I get an idea for a project, I want it done and over quickly. I don't want to be laboring it for weeks and months. That's why I tend to be very, very strict. You're going to write a script and it's going to be approximately 500 to 700 words, and that's it.
That's cool. I mean, I completely understand that. This is an interesting one. The current state of the fandom and the Doctor Who fan community. And I think the next 3 will kind of bunch together into just one answer, just to save a bit of time, because they're kind of loosely connected anyway. Okay, so the current state of the Doctor Who fandom. We talked earlier about how it's very difficult to say things in fear of you being either labelled a sycophant, a sexist, a racist, we'll just consume anything. Like when we did our Revolution of the Daleks review, I found myself constantly saying so much negativity. I kind of did get a little bit like, why do I even bother reviewing this anymore? Because I find myself not being able to enjoy a lot when I review, so that's probably kind of a thing why I don't really review as much as I did in the past. But when it comes to the fandom, there obviously are sections of it's a majority of really, really great people and obviously share this insanity. But like I said, even with something like the Paradigm, I'll say that I quite like them. I wouldn't have minded them replacing the Bronze Daleks, and then somebody will just latch onto you and go, "Well, you're wrong. You got to take your opinion out of this. It doesn't matter what you think. The majority hated them," and it's like, well, yeah, it's just it kind of got a bit too much for me when so I've kind of stepped away from Twitter and the Facebook groups and things like that, because it feels like every time I put something in, I always get something taken out of me, and it just tires me out. So I'm kind of not wanting to do Doctor Who reviews as much. I'll let you have a go on your take.
Well, you see, social media has a lot to answer for, and although there are plenty of people of my generation who've embraced social media, there are plenty of us who are very skeptical about it. And I think the problem is it gives a forum to a certain mentality of fan, which back in the old days when I was growing up was confined to the letters page of Doctor Who magazine. And one of the issues that we have, talking of Doctor Who magazine, which I stopped buying a long time ago, is that whereas Doctor Who magazine used to give a very balanced and critical view of the state of the series, and you would have different writers in the 80s and 90s who would look at the series and they would give various viewpoints, and various viewpoints were allowed to be expressed in the letters page. Since Doctor Who came back in 2005, and again, I think it links to something I said earlier, this idea that if you dare to criticize it, it might be taken off air again. Doctor Who magazine does not critically review and look at the output of the series. When it came back, and I was still buying the magazine right the way through regularly until the Matt Smith era, and I cannot think of a single review that they gave of any story that criticized the many negative elements of the writing and the output. And I thought, where is the objectivity here? It's almost like you are being paid to promote, and not look at something critically. I don't necessarily mean academically, but to acknowledge that actually that particular bit of writing or that performance or that monster really wasn't very good. I think of something like World War III and Aliens of London? Have I got the one with the Slitheen?
Yeah, yeah.
Who were absolutely dreadful. I don't remember reading anything about, that criticised the appalling juvenile writing of the Russell T Davies era. The fact that most of the time it was like watching a soap opera. And that's why I think when fans on forums like this and on Twitter dare to put forward anything which says, well, hang on a minute, bits of that were good, but other bits really didn't work, particularly at the moment. And this seems to be something since Jodie Whittaker began and the Chibnall era. Because I remember I used to chat quite frequently on YouTube on the messages. Do you remember when YouTube had messages and you were allowed to direct messages? And there were quite a few. Kingfisher Tom springs to mind. Yeah. And he would send me a message. What did you think about the episode this week? Wasn't this poor? Wasn't that poor? That wasn't very good, was it? And you could have that back and forth. And fans were able. I mean, do you remember when Batman March did that really funny video when Chibnall was announced as Moffat's successor? Yeah, and it's got him and his brother reading a magazine. And one is, oh, Moffat's leaving. Oh, who's the new writer? Oh, it's Chris Chibnall. What did he write? Oh, 42. What? Oh, should we go and watch Pyramids of Mars? And you were able to be critical not that long ago. But now, if you dare to say anything about the appalling writing, the appalling political correctness, the fact that Doctor Who is not about entertainment anymore, it's about preaching messages. And if you have got an era which is deliberately being divisive in terms of the narrative decisions that it makes, like The Timeless Children, and then you wonder why there is a backlash. But now you're not allowed to have opinions that go again, that say anything critical about either the narrative decisions or the casting decisions or whatever it might be, because it is so easy in this woke age to start bandying around terms like you used before, sexist, racist, or whatever it might be. A classic case is, I watched the last Doctor Who story I watched over the last few days was The Mutants, which is all about colonialism and apartheid and racism. But it's not there saying, hey, kids, this is about colonialism and racism and apartheid. It's subtle, it's done in a metaphorical way, and the message is more powerful. Remembrance of the Daleks is a metaphor for racism. But there's not that preachiness about it. It credits the audience with having a degree of intelligence. Now, the fact that you've got the Doctor practically turning to camera and say, don't litter, kids, single-use plastics are evil. Yes, we know. We're here to be entertained and to get the deeper messages through metaphor and symbolism. That just appears to be completely forgotten. And I say that as a literature scholar. I always have an issue with books which are about issues. This is about this, as opposed to those novels or those books that deal with really key, deep issues, but do it in a much more subtle way. That's my problem with the Chibnall era. And I think it's indicative of the entertainment sector as a whole. And I think that's been exacerbated even more in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I'm perfectly capable of being able to step back and hear everybody out when it comes to, the criticisms and the praises for Doctor Who.
I don't hate anybody because they like Jodie Whittaker.
No, exactly.
But if you dare to say, as many YouTubers have, we don't actually think much. I don't think she's a very good doctor.
No, I
And the
don't either.
reason I don't think she's a very good doctor has got nothing to do with the fact that she's a woman. She's just not very good. She doesn't have the gravitas. She doesn't have the screen presence. For the first season, it looked to me like she was primarily trying to be a combination of David Tennant and Matt Smith and not her own doctor. So, the idea of the doctor being a woman, I know Sidney Newman said back in the 80s that that's what needed to happen to rejuvenate the show. And it's interesting, going back to the mutants, there's a line in it where Professor Sondergaard, I think it is, says to the doctor, or it might be Kai or one, and they say, no man can survive on the surface of Solos. And the doctor actually says, no man, no. And I thought, that's interesting. I'm sure they're not suggesting way back then that the doctor could become a woman, but if you wanted to unpick it that way, then the doctor is not tied to any one gender. But to then make it a woman and have such a diluted, weak performance. Jo Martin was better in the however many minutes she was on screen as the doctor than Jodie Whittaker has been throughout the whole tenure. So I don't have an issue the fact that the doctor's a woman, although I believe that the decision was made to be deliberately different and divisive and to tick boxes, which I'm against. But if they were going to do it, they should have chosen a far stronger actor to play the Doctor, and I just don't think they got it right.
I think that was kind of back in 2018. I wasn't particularly fond of the idea of a female Doctor because I don't know, it just didn't interest me. But over time, I've warmed to the idea because I don't know, it's just one of those things which it's not the end of the world for me, a woman playing the part, but the idea for me was, okay, if you're going to do it, then win me over, prove me wrong. And Jodie Whittaker just never proved me wrong. And and when Jo Martin came along, I thought, yeah, I'm getting this now. I can see it working. But for me, Jodie, it just, I don't really know what the correct term is. She's just very passive towards everything that happens.
Yes, I think that's it. It's that passivity and not having the gravitas. And I'm sure that there are plenty of those who are enjoying the era who would be able to cite things that would go against that. But I can't see it, and I stick with the program. And unlike in Peter Capaldi's tenure, where I did stop watching because I thought the writing was so awful, I have stuck with the Chibnall era, hoping that it's going to get better. And every so often there's a glimmer of hope. There's an episode I thought, yeah, I quite enjoyed that. Only quite enjoyed. And might revisit at a later date. But more often than not, I've found myself getting to the end of the episode and thinking, no, that was deeply unsatisfying television. And again, going back to the issue of critical fandom, from somebody who is not invested in the Chibnall era at all, I think there has been far more toxicity on the side of those who support the Chibnall era and support Jodie Whittaker than on those that don't rate it. I think a lot of the bile and the unpleasantness on social media has been perpetrated by those who are supposedly supporting this era and this casting.
Now, what do you mean you're not enjoying it? There's something wrong with you.
It's a really, and again, this is from somebody that I quite respect, a YouTuber. I won't mention them, but they posted on Twitter a really crass comment. And it was about 6 months ago, and I thought, what a stupid thing to say. And the tweet was, the reason you don't like Jodie Whittaker, this wasn't me, it was a general, if you don't like this. The reason you don't like Jodie Whittaker as the Doctor is because you don't like female leads. Now, how pathetic, how crass to make such a generalized statement, as if to say, if you don't like Jodie Whittaker's portrayal, it's because you've got something about female actors, which is just ridiculous. And that's the sort of mentality that you're seeing in the fandom.
Yeah, it just feels like you can't win, no matter what you say. So I just miss being able to talk about Doctor Who properly, because
Hmm.
back in the days where I used to review, it was fun. And the Who Addicts, I'm sure you know them, they were pretty much bullied off of doing new reviews because they just had a level head and criticised it properly, and people thought that they hated the show. And it's like, no, they're just offering their general opinion on, it's not great. It could be a hell of a lot better. Like Revolution of the Daleks, for example. People, I saw some ridiculous comments saying it was the best Doctor Who episode ever, and it was like, it really wasn't.
See, I genuinely believe, and I don't think you've got to look at Doctor Who academically, but just on a basic level of narrative structure and storytelling. Since 2005, there does not seem to be a single writer, with maybe the exception of Mark Gatiss, as I mentioned, who has any real concept of what a good story is. And you spend huge amounts of time in the company of the Doctor and the companions so that you're not invested at all in the problem that they're supposedly supposed to be sorting out. You don't get supporting characters fleshed out. The villains aren't given enough screen time. So therefore, as a viewer, you've not really got any real clue as to what their motivation is, because you're spending far too long looking at it through the companion's eyes or being with the Doctor all the time. The story isn't given room to breathe, and that's been a problem since 2005, and it continues to today, especially when you're going to come up with ideas which supposedly rewrite the whole lore of the program. And I'm referring, of course, to the timeless children concept, which I just thought, why are you doing this? Is this just to make your mark on the show? And that's the problem. I feel like, going back to that idea of cliques, I think there's this clique of writers who are trying to outdo one another. You destroyed Gallifrey, I'll bring it back. Well, I don't like the fact you've brought it back, so I'll destroy it again.
Yeah.
It's like a group of kids writing it in the playground. It just does not appeal to me in terms of its narrative structure and the focus of the plots. And as I said before, if you're going to sacrifice plot for the sake of a message or preaching at the audience, then I'm sorry, that's not the way to engage your viewer. Certainly not engaging me.
I mean, we'll go on to the next thing in a minute, but I mean, the thing that you kind of nailed it with the Gallifrey thing, because as soon as I found out the Master destroyed Gallifrey again, I thought, for God's sake, why are we still doing this? Like in 2005, we brought Gallifrey. Well, it was established that the Time War happened, and then they brought it back in the 50th, and you're like, okay, let's just leave Gallifrey alone for a bit. Let's just not do it until we get somebody who's actually capable of handling the Time Lord stuff properly. And then Chris Chibnall comes along and goes, haha, no, I'm just going to destroy it again. And the amount of praise that episode got, and especially from people which, love the classic series and, like, have been long-term fans, for them all of a sudden to go, oh my god, plot twist, the Master killed Gallifrey, so amazing. And it's like, okay, yeah, I respect your opinion, but it's just one of those things where, can you not see they're doing the exact same thing over and over again?
And this is the problem that I've had from day one, and something that the BBC really need to sort out. The show should not be written by fans. It really shouldn't.
Mm.
I mean, I think the whole concept of the Time War was ridiculous anyway, because it's the sort of thing that only a fan could think of. And if I'm remembering correctly at the time, Russell T Davies felt that killing off the Time Lords was important so that when the show began for a new audience, it didn't come with all of that baggage that might alienate a new audience. Well, hang on a minute. We didn't have any concept of the Time Lords for the first 6 years of the show.
Yeah.
So why not simply not
Not
mention
mention
it?
them.
By
Yeah.
actually creating the Time War, that created a baggage
Yeah.
and a continuity for the show that was a misstep from the very first episode. And that's what I mean. That's the sort of fan mentality. What will the not we think? What will the casual viewer think? Oh, we better sort that out. We'll make a problem out of something that was never a problem in the first place. Given how Doctor Who had been off the air and out of the public consciousness for a significant amount of time, how many people in March 2005 would have sat down and thought, right, where are the Time Lords? What's a Time Lord? It was a ridiculous concept to begin with. And now, you know, when you've got people like we've just been saying, oh, well, we'll bring the Time Lords back and now we'll kill them off again. The BBC need to be very clear. We're after quality writers. You know, Terrance Dicks wasn't a Doctor Who fan. Robert Holmes, Philip Hinchcliffe were not Doctor Who fans. They were producers and writers who were trying to create good drama, and that's what it needs to get back to. I do not want to see a new showrunner who is a fan of Doctor Who. I think it's the worst thing that they can do going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. We're just in a mess, and I've never actually wanted the show to be cancelled before, but I do now because I just want it to heal and
it
come
needs
back.
a rest.
It needs a rest. It's so tired, and it just baffles me how people are still keeping up with it and forcing positivity out of themselves. And it's like, I mean, you might enjoy it. It's good for you. At the end of the day, I can't take that away from you, but you're really stretching something out that's so tired, and the formula is so tired. They really need to change how they present it, because like Series 9 tried to change the formula with all two-parters, but it just didn't work because Clara was still there and there was no more development for her character. It was just dragging out. They just seem to do that in Doctor Who. They just seem to drag out stuff which isn't important.
I still think they should take a risk and go back to the 25-minute format, bringing back the cliffhangers, even if they do it like they did in Peter Davison's tenure, where you had it on 2 consecutive nights.
Yeah.
Say a Friday night and a Saturday night, or Saturday night and Sunday. I think it was Monday and Tuesday in Davison's time. But to go back to the 25-minute format and give stories time to breathe and to flesh out. And I think the discipline of the writing, of having to get so much in. You know, I once did a comparison just for interest. You know, how many different scenes and how many different things happened in the first 25 minutes of a classic story and the first 25 minutes of a New Who? Given that so many people say, oh, the classic series is too slow paced or anything like that, there was more interest, more storyline development, more scenes, more characters in 25 minutes of classic Who than there was in 25 minutes of New Who. And I think they should at least have a go at refreshing the formula and go back, because, you know, people are still watching soap operas which go out in 25-minute segments. So the interest is still there in short pieces of drama. So why not go back to that? Because I think it would be one way of potentially refreshing what has become a relatively tired formula. And the other thing which I think is tired is the story arc. You know, I'm sick of these portentous, you know, oh, you are the timeless child, or silence will fall, or bad wolf. It's ridiculous. And you get fed up, or I get fed up, of these portentous ideas being put forward, which sometimes aren't even concluded in that series. They roll over to the next. I think it was interesting when it was brought back because it had never been done before. But then it became, ooh, what's the arc for this series? You know, what's it going to all be about this series? And that became tired after about Series 3, I think.
That's true. Yeah, I'll read these comments and then we'll go on to just the last couple of things. And
sure.
Even though I like John Hurt, I would have preferred Paul McGann the 50th because he thinks he deserved it, and obviously there's Big Finish, but I mean, it would be better than what we got. I think that's what it says.
I think in response to that comment, I think that one of the things that needs to happen, and I know this isn't an original idea, plenty of people have suggested it, they should do a standalone series or 2 of Paul McGann. You know, set when it was supposed to be set, not, you know, coming back now.
Yeah.
But to do it, even if it was done as an independent production, I think it, because the best thing, actually, scrub victory of the Daleks, the best thing that ever happened in New Who was Night of the Doctor. I was blown away by that minisode. And Paul McGann, you know, for the brief amount of time he was on screen, it just showed that he was right and is right for the role. And he really deserves a proper run, really, that's beyond the rather niche audience of Big Finish.
I mean, I agree completely. But unfortunately, Paul McGann's probably... I mean, I know he still likes Doctor Who, but he's probably fed up with people asking, when are you going to come back? Because, I mean, in his eyes, he does Doctor Who in Big Finish, so I don't think it's ever going to happen. Although I'd love it to, it's probably never going to happen. I think we've talked a lot about character options and Daypol earlier, so I think, just for timing's sake, I think we'll just say watch the earlier bit if you've not seen it. So I'll bunch these three together. You've got a full-size Dalek, the voice acting, and non-Doctor Who related creativity. So I'll let you take that away, and then we'll be wrapping it up.
Well, I mentioned before, didn't I, about the non-Doctor Who.
No, it's horror.
The stuff that I've done in terms of amateur films and theatrical productions and so on. That's right. Well, what do you want to know about the full-size Dalek?
Well, you wrote it down. Like, what model is it?
Oh, yes. Well, I bought a Genesis style. I wish I'd bought a movie Dalek, but in the end, I opted for the Genesis style. So this Planet Earth replica, I've had it now for almost 15 years, and it lives on the landing, and it's the pride of my collection. And it's one of those that you sometimes go for weeks taking it for granted, and then all of a sudden one day you'll just be passing it, and you'll think, I've got a Dalek on the landing. You know, it's like the holy grail of a collection. So yeah, it's a bit of a dust magnet. You know, it needs going over with the duster every so often. But it's certainly one of my well, it is my favourite piece of merchandise. I'd never part with it.
Nice. If I were to, it's pretty obvious if I were to get a full size one, what one I'd get. It would. I don't know which color it would be, but it would definitely be one of those guys. It'd either be orange or yellow, because orange appeared once, so I feel like it's a very, very niche thing to have, and nobody else would bother buying one, and it'd be just... I like owning those kind of things.
I'm trying to remember whether or not this Planet Earth make the Paradigm. I think they might. I think they might do replicas of the Paradigm, and they're very, very expensive. I think they're about 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah, $6,000.
Presumably because of the size of the prop.
And if I were to be extra nerdy about it, the proportions just aren't correct. So that's like one of those things which kind of bugs me. But if I had the money, I'd have to get that. But right, so you've done voice acting any time. You've done it for other channels. Do you have any more coming out for any more future channels? Are you allowed to disclose that information? I don't know.
Well, no, it's quite all right, because I'm not, obviously, I wouldn't want to reveal the details of any projects that haven't been trailed or anything. There's one in particular that I'm sworn to secrecy over by the maker. But it's nice because the voice acting side of it is the thing I enjoy most. You know, I love the animation. I love, you know, playing with the figures and all of that. But I think one of the reasons, and again, I know somebody mentioned earlier about the fact that I was one of the first figure adventure makers on YouTube. There were those before me, but I think one of the things that I did bring to it, because it wasn't common at all, was actually voicing it. Because way back when, most of the animations, the Doctor Who animations on YouTube, had subtitles. They might have a bit of music and sound effects, but they weren't voiced. They just had subtitles. And I thought, well, I want to do the voices. I mean, I've got a modicum of acting talent. I certainly didn't know whether or not I would be able to do good Dalek voices, but, you know, everybody has to start somewhere. And it is the voice acting side of it that still excites me. And over the years, as I've become familiar with Audacity and more recently Reaper, and it still gives you that little thrill when you stick your voice into something and you put the modulation effect on, and you actually think, yeah, I do sound like quite a convincing 80s Cyberman there. or I've become a little bit not blasé about the Daleks, because I do them so often that I wouldn't like to think I was ever phoning it in. I think if you're going to do Daleks, you've got to do them properly, and there is something very cathartic about holding this microphone here, which is the one that I use, like this, and screaming down it at the top of your voice, and being breathless at the end of it. There is something incredibly cathartic about that. But because I've got used to the different modulations, and I'm no expert, I'm not a sound engineer. It's all done by ear and approximation. But the voice I'm most proudest of recently was because I thought I wasn't quite sure how to do that, and I fiddled around with the settings, and I thought, yeah, I've got that. Was the Croton voice.
Okay.
I'm finding the modulation, because you can pretty much guarantee any classic monster, more often than not, had a ring modulator effect on it. Not just the Daleks. There are quite a few monsters, the Sea Devils, for example, Morbius, and a number of others, the Wheeling Space Cybermen, apart from the CyberPlanner, which is Peter Hawkins with the electric palette. The ones that Roy Skelton does, I am convinced are done through a ring modulator. And I thought, the Croton voice sounds not dissimilar to a new series Cyberman, only the modulation is lower. So I just played around with the settings and talk like that, because that's how the Crotons tend to deliver their lines, in that sort of Cod South African accent. And then played around with that and put the modulation on it. And I thought, actually, that's not bad. And because I had those 3D printed Croton figures that a very kind chap on Twitter did for me, I thought, I'm going to put them up against the movie Daleks. But that was only possible because the voice sounded right. If the voice hadn't sounded right, I wouldn't have done it. It's got to have that degree of authenticity. Same recently with the Auton voices. It was quite obvious when I was watching Terror of the Autons that a ring modulator was used again, only they put a very, very high level of distortion on Hayden Jones's voice, who did the voices in Terror of the Autons. And I just fiddled around again with the modulation frequency, fiddled around with the distortion, and again came up with something that's not exact, but is a reasonable approximation of how the Autons sounded in Terror of the Autons. So that bit, that the voice acting side of it, is the bit that really still excites me. And I do get a lot of questions about it. How do you do the voices? Well, it's quite simple. You've got to perform. You've got to actually go for it. There's no point saying exterminate, exterminate, you will be destroyed. That's not, you can put any level of modulation on that you want, and it's going to sound awful. You've got to actually, I know it's going to sound pretentious because I'm not a professional actor or a professional voiceover artist, but I use my voice a lot in my profession. And as I said, I've got a degree of acting talent, a small amateur degree of acting talent. The answer to the question is, you find the modulations and the sound effects that are right, and then you blooming well act it. That's how you do the voices. That's the only way I can explain it. And the other one recently, which has got nothing to do with modulation at all, I was shortlisted for the role of the Ainley Master in a fan audio production of that missing Colin Baker story, the one that was never recorded. Was it Yellow Fever? I think it was the one that was supposed to be set in Singapore with the Autons, and the Master and the Rani. And I gave a performance as the Ainley Master. I didn't get the role, but I've since used it in one of my productions, and just doing that approximation of the Ainley Master. That's attracted quite a lot of positive feedback as well. So I'm really quite proud of that one.
It's good. Yeah, you do a great job.
But it's about getting the ear in. It's about listening. If you're going to do good voices, you've got to listen. And although I don't sound like Anthony Ainley, when he speaks, he tends to, if you're going to get a decent Ainley, you've got to smile. And then he's got that strange sort of sound when he says his S's. And you sort of put all that together, and the sort of rhythms of the speech, and it's the same with the Daleks and the Cybermen, you get the rhythms of the speech right, and then hopefully you do something which on an amateur level is relatively passable.
Very insightful. Very insightful.
And
It's a
people must like them because they keep asking me to do them.
yeah.
You know, nearly every day I've got another project in the inbox, so I must be doing something right.
I mean that's the best part of this community though, like the sharing aspect of the passion and not feeling obligated to give me the voice. Now I want everyone to do my voices. It's just that it's just the shared passion for the characters, which is the best part, and just the talent which I love about this hobby. And yeah, at the end of the day, it's always like personality and talent, which are the two main things which keep me coming back to any YouTuber or any filmmaker or whatever. And yeah, so it's been with that in mind, it's been great talking to you.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity, Ozzy. It's nice to be able to connect in this way with somebody else who shares the same passion. So thank you for suggesting it in the first place.
Cool. So yeah, thank you guys for watching, and thank you so much for the questions that you submitted to us.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And be sure to check out the CyberPlanner's channel if you haven't already, which I'm surprised about because I'm pretty sure the majority of my viewers probably already know who he is, but go over if you haven't already. And yeah, so thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hang on, let me stop